Good morning. Everyone hear me out there? Yeah, I can hear myself really well. All right. So, the topic of this morning's session is, ecological and regulatory considerations for vineyard development and management. And it's something that is kind of near and dear to our heart as NRCS as an agency. We were formed back in 1935 in response to the horrible devastation that was going on as a result of the Dust Bowl, and where new lands had been broken out for crop production, coupled with drought, years and years of drought, and a real disaster occurred. So our father, Hugh Hammond Bennett, was a man with a lot of foresight, and he said, you know what, we need to use our agricultural lands. We need to produce food. We don't need to have people stop producing, but we need to do it in a way that considers each site, the capabilities of each site, the limitations of each site, and that came together as conservation planning. Our role in all of this is really to help a landowner develop a conservation plan that meets their objectives and meets the needs of their particular operation and their particular site. So that is something we've been engaged in for, over 80 years now. Now, the process, as you can see, what do you guys think when you see something like this? It looks like a lot of boxes and arrows and kind of complicated and, where do I start? The thing is, you can start anywhere with conservation planning, and that's what we find ourselves doing when we're working with a landowner. We may come in at any step in this process. So it's really circular, it's very cyclical. There is kind of no beginning or end point to it. A plan is something, as you know, working out on the land and making your living, producing food or commodities, that even though you have the best plan in the world, things change out there. Things are not set in stone. Our landscapes, our ecological processes are not static. They're very dynamic. So we approach planning as a very cyclical, kind of never-ending, a process that goes on and on, kind of without beginning or end. We're always working to perfect it and to meet new challenges. So this is not rocket science, right? Let's kind of look at what's involved here. So for the sake of going through this, we'll start up here at the top. So we have 3 phases, basically, and 9 steps that are involved. And if you look at these 9 steps, like inventorying the resources, identifying problems, determining objectives, analyzing the resource data, all very common sense stuff, and how do we break into that? How do we approach it? We get out there, we work with you, we talk to you, we listen to you, we start documenting these things. As we move through the process, we're looking at generally trying to, it's a problem-solving process. So we're looking at issues you may have. Now, your issues would vary, wildly from one operation to another. You're all going to have your set of unique natural resource issues that you're dealing with. So that is really where the site-specific part of this comes in. So we're looking at coming up with some good alternatives, formulating them, and then really evaluating them, kind of running them through an evaluation process to try and determine, is this really where you want to go? Is this going to work for you? Is this what you really want to put into a conservation plan? And then a decision at some point has to be made. Which way are we going to go? What are we going to implement? A large part of this I have found over the years is not, it's documenting what you've already done. So, and I find particularly with working with vineyard folks that so much of the conservation has been implemented. You're doing a very good job with your cover between your rows. The irrigation water management is being done at a pretty darn high level. Integrated pest management is being performed at a high level. So oftentimes what we're doing is just really documenting what you have already implemented. So there's our second phase, is coming up with alternatives, evaluating them, and making a decision on where to go. So we're understanding the problem in our first phase. We're really getting a handle on what we're working with in the way of resources and what the issues are, and very importantly, what your objectives are. Second phase is understanding the solutions that we're coming up with, and really trying to grapple with that and come up with the best alternative for you. The third phase is application and evaluation, and this is where we really get down to work and implement things. Now, as I said earlier, things have already been implemented. We want to document those things, but you have additional, I'll call them practices or measures that you will be applying or installing into the future. So we want to get a good handle on what those are, and then as we implement, we want to be able to evaluate how things are going with this planning process. And, as we go along, we may need to revisit what we've done, up at the beginning of our process. So this is very cyclical, as I mentioned earlier, understanding the results. So that's how these three phases of the planning process are kind of summarized. So NRCS conservation plans are site-specific documents. So we're looking specifically at your site. We're not trying to do this all from the office. We need to get out on site with you and look at the site, evaluate what's going on there. They consider the decision makers' objectives, resource concerns, and resource sustainability. So that idea of every planning scenario or every site being unique with its own set of resource concerns, very, very important to this process. So sustainability, very important. We want to formulate and evaluate alternatives and also look at potential environmental impacts. And then we're trying to help, in NRCS's role, we're trying to help the landowner to the point of making the best possible decision and implementing the best possible solutions that we can. So our resource concerns that we're really focused in on in the NRCS conservation planning process are summarized by the acronym SWAPA. So SWAPA, we have soil, we have water, we have air, we have plants and vegetation, we have animals, and in this case, I think, the wildlife. Those are the animals that we're talking about. We also need to think about the people involved, or the human element in the planning process, because if we don't have, we're not bringing along our customer, our client, and paying attention to their objectives and their needs, we are not going to get very far. And one that was added recently into our planning process, into our resource list that we look at, is energy. So that's another resource area that we're concerned with in our planning process. So a plan, and this is where things get kind of, over the years, where I've had to engage in some introspection and figure out, we as NRCS come charging in. We love to help people develop conservation plans. It's great stuff. Everyone ought to have one. Everyone wants one for various reasons, obviously. You all are faced with a lot of regulatory requirements at this point for ag waiver, other regulatory issues that you're dealing with. Certainly SIP certification is a reason that you might want a conservation plan, or maybe just for your own benefit because you feel it's the right thing to do, and you want to engage in this conservation planning process. But very, very important to remember that it is not my plan as the NRCS, representative here trying to help you, it's yours. And so last year sometime, Craig and I and the Resource Conservation District, Devin Best with the Resource Conservation District in Templeton, we kind of got together and said, this planning thing is great, but how do we engage the landowners in it a little bit more? Because, if we just take it all on, yeah, we're listening to you, we want to know what your objectives are, it's site-specific, there's still something missing there, and that is your direct involvement. So this is an attempt to get all of you involved in developing your own plans. So a template was created, and it is available, and I've had several people actually fill this out and get engaged and get involved in the planning process to the point that they're comfortable. So I'd like you to take a look at this and go through this a little bit. It will follow those 9 steps of conservation planning that we saw earlier. So the first page of this, we're documenting some basic things here about, the property, the location, and always attaching maps wherever possible. Maps are so important to show, and I have found that vineyard folks generally have very good maps. They have very good block maps of their operations, and they're really good starting points for conservation planning maps. So here we go. We can see that on page 1, we're asking you to come up with, some idea of your objectives. So your objectives as far as your operation goes. What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? What are we trying to do out here? Here's just some things that we, kind of common things we see. You may have some erosion issues on your roads. You may be looking to protect water quality to the best of your ability because it's the right thing to do. Plus, there's folks out there who are telling you you need to do this. Improve your water use efficiency. We all understand that we're all tapped into groundwater basins that aren't infinite, that we need to do the best job we can to make the best, most efficient use of the water that we do have. Improving soil health. That's something that's gaining momentum. I see all kinds of things out there about soil health now, and everyone's kind of joining into that soil health, and as it relates to carbon sequestration, as it relates just having good productive soil, it is an emerging issue. Developing wildlife habitat in areas where it's appropriate on the property. Certainly not in your cropped areas, but maybe in non-cropped areas where it might fit in. And then, of course, you might be looking to obtain a SIP certification. So as we go through, I'm going to kind of go through this, not spend too much time here. You'll get the idea as we go through. But we've looked at that objectives part of the planning process. Now we need to inventory our resources. So it goes through, this template goes through the soil, the water, the air, plants, animals, all of those, and allows you to summarize, what are your resources? What are some of the concerns you have with that particular resource, soil, water, air, whichever, and problems you recognize you have that need to be dealt with, that you plan on doing something about, and then what measures maybe you've already taken to address some of these issues, and then another place to allow you to plan out into the future. What additional measures might you do to address these resource concerns? Now, a real nice place to go, if you're looking for soils information in particular, is the Web Soil Survey. And how many people are familiar with that and have used it? So quite a few. It's something our agency has been working on and perfecting over the years, but I think it's been available now probably for maybe 8 or 9 years. And it's really a good tool. If you would like to get in there and use it, you can produce a real nice soil map and soil report. If you have any trouble using it, give us a call. We can help you through it. But it is a very, very good tool. We're going into the water. That means streams, that means ponds, that means reservoirs on your property, an inventory of those sorts of things, issues you have with them, practices you've implemented to address issues with your water sources, what you plan to do in the future. And this I put up here because that web soil survey can also be used to, produce a pretty decent map for water, particularly streams. And if you zoom far enough out from, here's our area of interest right here. I can't go that far, sorry. But we can see where, where that property drains to. So you have an idea of this property is draining into the Estrella River, goes into the Salinas, and from there to the Monterey Bay. So you have some of that basic information. So we go through page after page, and this entire thing, I think, is about 9 pages or so. Yeah. And I would encourage you to get a hold of this if you're interested in conservation planning and take a stab at it. Think about your operation and answer some of these questions, because, you can come to me and we can help you with it. You can come to Craig, you can come to the RCD. But I think we're on to something that I hope will just engage our landowners a little bit more and get them to take, some ownership in the process of this conservation plan, because it's becoming more and more important for agricultural folks, just for a lot of different reasons. And I think this is an approach that might actually get more interest stimulated on your part to own this and to look at it as a living document, as something that, we developed it this year, it's going to stay static, we're never going to change, with the realization that things change, and so will this conservation plan. Here is a place on this template for you to do a little problem solving. And so you've, through this process of filling this out, you've identified practices or measures that you might still want to implement on your place, and a place to describe those and to prioritize them. And this is very important because we can't run out and do everything all at once. We don't have the time, the financial resources, we don't have the ability to, let's just get it all done. Or if you do, that's great. But a place for you to prioritize what measures, what practices you are going to look at implementing over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever your time frame is. So alternatives, just to clear up some of the jargon a little bit, they're just groups of practices. They're groups of measures that together address all of the issues that have been identified. That's all an alternative is. This is what an NRCS conservation plan document looks like. We call it a record of decisions because it is the measures that we've both agreed should be implemented, and it gives the, what, where, when, how much kind of information as we move forward. What are we doing? Where are we doing it? How much? That sort of thing. A good plan map. As I say, you mostly have very good base maps already for your operations to start working off of, or you can go into that web soil survey, you can go into Google Earth. There's lots of ways to get a map. We can provide a map for you if you want a working map. This is kind of a final map here. It has the practices already identified, where they're going and such, but this is kind of a final product. But you need a good working map. You need something to brainstorm on. Where do I think a filter strip might be helpful on my operation? Where do I have real problem with my access roads? Where are they, draining improperly and causing erosion or giving me trouble? As far as practices goes and measures, what are they? Well, you can look up, ours is public information. Our field office technical guide has practices from A to Z, access roads to, I think, windbreaks is the farthest in the alphabet I could think of. But the Vineyard Team also has resources for you. There are many places to get information on good management practices or best management practices. These are just a few. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that a good plan it's clear and easily understood by you, the person who's trying to use it, not by me, that's not mine. You don't need a flow chart necessarily to understand it. It is dynamic, not set in stone. It's going to change over time for all sorts of reasons. It's really based in reality, and it considers your resources, your time, your financial resources, and the limitations of those natural resources we talked about right up front when we began this whole talk about conservation planning, each site to its capabilities and considering the limitations of the site, and developed by, hopefully more and more by you all as the most interested party in this conservation plan. And it's as comprehensive as we can make it. So it's dealing with every resource of concern out on your property. And so it's comprehensive. So the take home here, I think, is that we want you to get involved. We have come up with this template. We would love to have people try it out and get some feedback from you. You take it as far as you can. And when you need help from NRCS, from RCD, or from Craig, that's the point to say, hey, I need a little guidance. I need a little help with this process. But we would love to have you try it. The planning process is never finished. It goes on and on and on. So, all right. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
We've got time for a few questions. We have any questions for Margy?
Yeah, just curious if your plan and template, if you've either connected it at all with, making equip a little more easier. You're doing all the work, filling in all the information, and then, NRCS, apply for our equip grants, and then I got to fill out another 20, 30 documents.
Well, yeah, when you step in the world of, planning is one part. And we like to have a good plan in place before we even talk about equip or any financial assistance. But the financial assistance part of things, very, very helpful to implementing your plan, but you're stepping into you have eligibility, paperwork, and all sorts of things that we would love to help you with, but so much of it is, you have to fill out and complete for us. So I don't know of any way to make that part of it easier. Certainly having you engaged in the planning process part of it makes my job as a planner easier, but unfortunately those hurdles to get into the financial assistance part of the USDA, benefits, I know that's painful, and we do have Kim McHugh in our office, and she will help you as much as she possibly can through that. But I understand what you're saying, for sure.
What is EQIP?
EQIP is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So it's a farm bill program, and it is for agricultural producers, and it is to implement resource conservation practices or measures on agricultural land. So as an agricultural producer, you are eligible, but there are, further eligibilities that need to be met, like adjusted gross income limitations and things that people usually don't have a problem meeting. They're not exceeding those limits. It's just getting into the office, registering your farm, and going through that process. And it does take some time.
Yeah, you're entering the federal bureaucracy.
you're entering the federal, yes, in a big way.
So that linkage that you're looking for, we would all love that. I don't think that's going to happen, at least not in the near future.
But I think when people do cross that threshold and get there and are eligible and have the records and everything, the part of it that is implementing the actual practices and projects is fairly straightforward and not too painful. So that's the reward at the end, I guess.
Are there other programs to fund?
There are. There's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and that's project by project. It's very, straightforward. You have a project, we can help you financially to implement it. We do a lot of irrigation-related projects. We do cover crops, access road repairs, those sorts of things. And then there's the other that we have quite a good participation with vineyards on, is the Conservation Stewardship Program. And that's a program that kind of fits nicely for the vineyards because it's it's kind of incentive payments to keep doing the good things you're doing and do them at a higher level. So you're getting an annual payment in a 5-year contract to perform good stewardship. And that's one we have quite a good participation with vineyards in our county with.
Is WHIP still a thing?
Nope. WHIP was a Wildlife
gone.
Habitat Incentives Program, and that is now been swallowed up into EQIP. So we
Gotcha.
still do wildlife projects. It's just that funding's coming through EQIP.
Any other questions? We got time for one, maybe two.
The question I'm down in Riverside County. This kind of template seems like a really useful tool. Do you ever work with other conservation districts?
I work with the two in my service area. So I work with the Upper Salinas, Las Tablas, and the Coastal San Luis Resource Conservation Districts in my work area. The resource conservation districts themselves, and Andy will come up in a minute, they do a lot of collaborating amongst, between themselves. And I know that this template was presented, you folks presented it at an RCD regional meeting.
Okay.
So it's getting out there, and I'm more than willing, if anyone has any need or questions about it, I'm available to consult with on that for sure.
Great. And the other question I have is, I think all of us are dealing with the regional water board general ag orders. Is there any thoughts of NRCS becoming part of that process to make the goals of what they're trying to do for clean water a little more rational? Because what the ag orders are putting out make no sense at all.
Yeah, well, I think what we're doing is the conservation planning process, and when people come to us for assistance, we're helping them develop their plans. We're hoping to get you more involved with this template, but I think just trying to help you through that process, but we have no real way of changing it. But I think we can help you document things so that the Regional Water Quality Control Board is satisfied that you are addressing their concerns.